The other day I was going through my idea book here, just crossing off a few projects that I completed as well as adding new ones, and while I was in here, one of the projects that really stood out to me was to make a Paludarium style setup for some bonsai trees. Now as I was doing my research, the type of trees that seemed to be the most ideal for this type of setup were some ficus trees, of various kinds that is, but what I decided to go with here are some Ginseng Bonsai trees. The awesome and endearing feature about these trees are the bulbous roots down below. Each one looks a little bit different, and I think the combination of the three will make for a really cool jungle type of design. Again, I'm going to be doing a Paludarium style setup, and I decided to go with this custom built enclosure. It measures 24.5 inches wide by 12 3/4 inches deep and 10 inches tall total, with the front panel only being 6 1/4 inches high. Once filled with water, it will hold around 8.5 gallons or 32 liters. I originally built this tank for the all-in-one Betta aquascape, which I constructed like usual. I cut out the glass, assembled it with silicone, and built an internal filter with corrugated plastic. It worked well back then, but I had to modify it for this project. The filter box was no longer needed, so I removed that. Then I cut through the silicone and removed the front panel of glass. I scored and snapped this down like usual to go with the Paludarium style. I also went back and removed all of the old silicone. I taped everything off for clean beads. I also wiped down the glass with rubbing alcohol to remove oil and debris which could compromise the seal. From there I applied the new silicone and secured the modified glass. Then I put the seal on the inside of the tank, evened it out, and removed the tape. I let it cure overnight. When I came back, I scraped off any excess silicone. I also swapped out the tinted background with window frost film, and I added a new piece of neoprene on the bottom. This will act like a self-leveling mat, taking care of any inconsistencies. Provided the glass is thick enough, you can take this procedure and easily turn any enclosure into an open front Paludarium. It's really easy to do, and when all is said and done, it really allows the scape to be front and center, and that's what I'll do next. The aesthetic I have in mind is a grungy jungle type of environment, and one of the stones I think would work best for that type of look is Oko Dragonstone. It has a lot of incredible texture to it that will really play into the look, is easy to link together, giving the illusion of a single mass, and as one of my friends said, it just works. I couldn't agree more. My idea here is to create rocky structures that jut out of the water, something a little reminiscent of sea stacks. Here's an example of what I mean. To achieve this look, I'll need to attach several stones together. As usual, I'll use super glue gel to pull that off. Once dry, it's inert and totally fine to be in a tank. Anyway, I began by creating a foundation on the bottom with a large stone that's flat on both sides. I'll take advantage of this by stacking other stones on top of it to get the appropriate height. As I built that up though, I had to experiment with various stones and configurations. I also test fit the trees. I want them to hug to the crevices of the stones in a way that looks natural and seamless. These should look like they've been here for a long time, so understanding the materials before gluing was paramount. On a side note, you may have noticed that they're all cleaned off. I carefully did this earlier to make it easier to scape. That said, I have to spray them down regularly to keep the roots from drying out. Otherwise, this will all be for naught. Eventually, I saw how the pieces could fit together, so I got to work. I applied glue to the contact points between the stones. I let it set up. Then I put the tree back and continued. I decided to move the entire mass over to the right side of the enclosure. I felt that this orientation made for a more attractive design. This first structure will more or less act as a key element, dictating where everything else goes. In placing the subsequent pieces, I experimented once again until I got a natural fit. What I like to do is let the materials tell me where they should go by reading their features. This keeps me from overthinking what I'm doing and allows me to focus. Anyway, once I liked how everything fit together, I pulled the tree and glued the pieces together like before. I also sprayed the glue with water to expedite the drying process. I put the original tree back once more and worked in the second. I liked where it sat, but it needed additional rock work to look at home. I glued 2 stones together to fill in that space. I also sprinkled on some sand to help hide the glue. I repeated all of this for a third and final time on the left side. While the glue dried, I placed additional stones throughout the scape to complement the rest of the design. At long last, I could add the final tree to the design, which brought us here. This is the bare bones of the design, if you will. As is, I think it looks pretty good, but it's going to look even better once we dress it up with all of the details. The first thing I did was hydrate some dried sphagnum moss. I use this as a growing medium or substrate for the plants. Since it's absorbent, it will retain water that trickles down the rocks, making it usable for the other plants. I pressed it into crevices around the tree roots to keep them hydrated. This design is begging for more green. What better than a little moss? You should know by now that a setup like this absolutely demands it, and for this one I decided to go exclusively with thread moss. It seemed like a great option because of its finer texture. My thought here is that it will help retain the sense of scale that the trees create. I placed this throughout the enclosure to conceal the sphagnum moss and any lingering glue spots. Thread moss is a great option for riparian type settings like this one. It will readily adapt to a wetter environment and takes on an even finer texture. I don't know about you, but I think the pops of green all over the rocks are a welcomed addition. I gave it a good spray down after planting to ensure everything stayed hydrated. Then I went on to fill the tank and experiment with the pump. For this one I went with a My Mouse pump because of the small form factor. I got this from my friends over at Sicce. I have it hooked up to an airline tube that's blocked off on the end, so the water is pressurized. What I'll do is run it along the top of the scape and cut slits in it to create a spray bar of sorts. In theory it should work, but I wanted to test it first. It looked promising to me. So I went on to glue it to the scape at a few key points. In doing so, I tried to conceal it as best as possible behind the rock work. Once it was locked in, I cut slits along it with an X-Acto knife. This gave the setup a very slow trickle over all the areas where the moss and roots are. To finish it off, I went back and concealed the tube with more moss. Here's how it looks now. I'll add some more details to the top later on, but even in its current state, I think it looks pretty good. With this one, I didn't want a noticeable flow of water. Other than a drop here or there, I wanted to keep it pretty simple. I think the beauty of this one will be better appreciated as such. You'll understand what I mean by that later, but in the meantime, I need to drain the tank. As is, the pump is completely exposed and could suck up sand. To protect it from being damaged, I'll cover it with a piece of filter sponge. This will create a barrier that's easy to remove and clean if need be. I also included a command strip to keep the pump's cord in the ideal location. This keeps things tidy and completely hidden from view in the front. I thought this would be an appropriate setup for an atomizer as well. I got this ultrasonic mist maker from my friends over at UNS. Like the pump, I used strips to hold the unit in the proper location. Again, it's completely hidden from view. At this point, I've got the enclosure moved over to the rack and it's ready for the final touches. I'll start with the water feature portion of the build. I pulled out the loose stones so I can add the substrate. To make the look I want, I started with some fine white sand. This will contrast with the stones and make things pop a little more. From there, I put the loose stones back into the scape. I also broke up a less desirable stone to create debris. I can accentuate the sense of scale with these and imply that the stones have been eroding for many years. I placed them around the enclosure as such. Leaning into this idea further, I'll add some natural colored sand, which closely resembles the color of the stones. Other than that, there's not much else needed for the water feature. I think the barren look will contrast well with the detail of the sea stacks and create visual tension. I want to do a little more in the land area though. The trees on one hand could use a little pruning and shaping. I don't think I want to prune them just yet, but the tree on the left really needs adjusted. I wrapped some bonsai shaping wires around the two largest branches. With this, I was able to gently bend the branches down to a better looking position. I questioned adding more plants for a while and decided that it would look better if I did. Plants like Ficus pumila crucifolia and Cryptanthus nubicola should allow me to better create the jungle look I described earlier. I sparingly added the crypts in a few locations. Although they complement the scape well, too many would take away from the trees. As for the ficus, I put a few cuttings near the water's edge. I think that should do it. Time to get it filled up with water. This disrupted some of the sand, so I went back and adjusted it with my fan brush. Since there's minimal surface area in the tank, I decided to add a sponge filter as well. This one has been sitting in a quarantine tank with fish for a while now, so it's already seeded with beneficial bacteria. I think a tank like this demands floating plants. For this one I started off with Salvinia minima and redroot floaters. I later decided to add some duckweed as well for more texture and differentiation in scale. And at that, I think it looks awesome. I know how things go though. A tank like this isn't quite complete until we add the livestock. For this one, I kept it pretty simple because of the volume of water and went with 9 Emerald Eye Rasbora. As always, I also added some bladder snails. Even though it only holds a small amount of water, the overall size of the tank is quite large respectively. We're really just missing out on the height, but I don't think that's quite as important in some cases. And there you have it, the new bonsai tree Paludarium. I think it's a pretty neat design that has a cool vibe about it, especially with the Mist Maker. I typically think they're unnecessary, but this one really brings the setup together. What do you think? I can't wait to see how it progresses though. I think it should work out really well long term, but time will tell. I'm also enjoying the fish. They're decently shy though, so I've yet to see all 9 of them schooling together. It seems like 2 or 3 of them are still trying to get their bearings straight. I think they'll be fine though, just gotta give them a little more time to settle in. And that's all for now. As always, I hope you all enjoyed the build. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments. Like and subscribe to see more, and until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.